I never thought I'd be standing outside my childhood home, clutching a container of homemade chicken soup, watching my entire family celebrate my father's birthday without me. My mom had called yesterday saying Dad was sick and they were canceling the annual party. Yet here they all were, my sister, cousins, aunts, uncles, even my grandmother, who supposedly couldn't travel this year. Through the window, I watched my father, allegedly too ill for company, beaming as he blew out 60 candles on an enormous cake. My hand trembled as I pulled out my phone, hardly believing what I was seeing. In that moment, something inside me shattered like glass. I've always prided myself on being a good daughter. Growing up in our suburban Pennsylvania home, I was the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, organized the holiday decorations, and made sure Dad's favorite apple pie was ready for special occasions. At 32, I still prioritized family despite my demanding career as a hospital administrator. Just last month, I finally received the promotion I'd been working toward for years, becoming the youngest department head in our hospital's history. My father's birthday celebration was a treasured annual tradition. Dave Simmons wasn't just my dad, he was my hero, the man who taught me how to change a tire, build a birdhouse, and stand up for myself. Every year since I could remember, we gathered as a family to celebrate him with good food, better stories, and the chocolate cake recipe my grandmother had passed down through generations. When I called Mom earlier this week to confirm the party details, her response caught me off guard. "Oh, honey, we're actually canceling this year," she said, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper. "Your father's coming down with something nasty. He's been coughing all night and has a fever. We don't want to risk getting anyone else sick." "That's terrible," I replied, immediately shifting into caretaker mode. "Do you need me to pick up any medication? Has he seen a doctor?" No, I've got everything under control," Mom insisted. "You know how he is stubborn as an ox. He just needs rest." "Well, how about I come by anyway? I can make that chicken soup he loves." After some back and forth, she reluctantly agreed I could drop off soup, but warned me not to stay long since he needed rest. I couldn't help noticing this was becoming a pattern. Last Thanksgiving, my sister Ashley had somehow received a different time for dinner than I had, resulting in me arriving as everyone was finishing dessert. And at Christmas, the gift exchange mysteriously happened the night before I arrived, despite the family tradition of opening presents together on Christmas morning. Ashley had always received preferential treatment. 4 years younger than me, with our mother's delicate features and charming personality, she had mastered the art of getting what she wanted. While I worked multiple jobs through college, Ashley received a fully funded education and a car for her 21st birthday. I never complained. Family was family, and I loved my sister despite her flaws. As I turned onto my parents' street with the container of soup in my passenger seat, I noticed the unusual number of cars lining the road. My cousin Mark's SUV, Uncle Paul's vintage Mustang, even my grandmother's caregiver's distinctive van with the sunflower bumper sticker. A knot formed in my stomach as I parked across the street. I approached the house slowly, the sound of laughter and music growing louder with each step. Through the large bay window, I could see the living room transformed with streamers and balloons. My entire family was there, glasses raised in celebration. In the center stood my father, looking healthier than I'd seen him in months, his face glowing as he prepared to blow out his birthday candles. My mother stood beside him, her arm wrapped around his waist, smiling broadly. And there was Ashley, perfectly dressed, as always, holding up her phone to capture the moment. My hands shook as I pulled out my own phone and began recording, hardly believing what I was witnessing. I zoomed in just as Ashley set down her phone and picked up a glass of champagne. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice clear even through the window. "To Dad on his 60th birthday, and to finally having a perfect family gathering without any drama." The guests laughed, knowingly raising their glasses. My stomach dropped as I realized what she meant. I was the drama they were celebrating being without. Before I could process my next move, my feet were carrying me to the front door. I turned the knob, finding it unlocked, and stepped into the entryway. No one noticed me at first as I walked toward the living room, still clutching my container of soup, my phone recording in my other hand. So, here's to many more perfect family gatherings. Ashley was saying, her glass held high. Without the drama I finished for her, my voice cutting through the room like a knife. The reaction was immediate. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. The only sound was the soft instrumental music playing from the speakers. My mother's champagne glass nearly slipped from her fingers. Ashley's mouth hung open mid-sentence. And my father, his expression of shock and genuine dismay, told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't been part of this deception. "Courtney," my mother finally said, breaking the silence. "What are you doing here?" I held up the soup container. "You said Dad was sick. I brought soup." Another painful silence stretched across the room. My aunts and uncles averted their eyes. Cousins suddenly became fascinated with their drinks. Only my grandmother, seated in the corner, had the decency to look ashamed. "There must have been a miscommunication," my mother said smoothly, setting down her glass. "I was going to call you later today about the change of plans." "A miscommunication," I repeated, looking around at the decorations that had clearly taken hours to arrange. "So, you accidentally told me the party was cancelled, accidentally invited everyone but me, and accidentally celebrated without me." My father stepped forward, confusion written across his face. "Linda, what is Courtney talking about? You said she had to work today and couldn't make it." Another piece of my heart broke at his words. So that was the lie she'd told him. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," my mother insisted, attempting to take the soup from my hands. "Why don't we talk about this later?" I stepped back, clutching the container. "No misunderstanding, Mom. I have it all right here." I held up my phone, still recording, including Ashley's charming toast about finally having a drama-free family gathering. The look that passed between my mother and sister confirmed everything. "Courtney, wait," my father called as I turned to leave. "Don't go. We can sort this out." But I was already walking out the door, tears burning in my eyes but refusing to fall. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of uncomfortable conversations, resuming, my father's voice rising in question, my mother's placating responses. As I got into my car, I noticed my hands were still steady, despite the earthquake happening inside me. Something fundamental had shifted, and there was no going back to the family I thought I had just 30 minutes ago. For 3 days, I didn't answer my phone. The calls and messages piled up, most from my father, several from extended family members, and exactly none from Ashley or my mother. I went through the motions at work, smiled at colleagues, and made decisions about hospital staffing, while feeling completely hollow inside. My best friend Taylor brought over pizza and wine on the 3rd night, refusing to leave until I talked. "You can't just ignore them forever," she said, pouring me another glass of Cabernet. "Watch me," I replied, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. "Have you listened to any of your dad's messages?" I shook my head. "I can't. Not yet. Court, you need to at least hear his side. From what you told me, he looked genuinely shocked." "That's what hurts the most," I admitted. "All these years I thought we were close. How could he not know what was happening right under his nose?" The doorbell rang before Taylor could respond. I ignored it, but the ringing continued, followed by persistent knocking. "I'll get it," Taylor sighed, setting down her wine. A moment later, I heard my father's voice in the hallway. I froze, unprepared for this confrontation. "She doesn't want to see anyone," Taylor was saying. "Please," my father replied, his voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." When Taylor returned to the living room, my father was behind her, looking older than I'd ever seen him. His normally perfect posture was slumped, his eyes red-rimmed. "I'll give you two some privacy," Taylor said, squeezing my shoulder as she gathered her purse. After she left, my father stood awkwardly in the center of my living room, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Courtney," he began, "I had no idea your mother told you the party was cancelled. I swear to God if I had known." "She told you I had to work," I said flatly. He nodded, looking down. "I tried calling your office that morning, but your assistant said you'd taken the day off. When I asked your mother about it, she said you must have changed your plans and would be arriving later." He ran a hand through his silver hair. I kept watching the door for you. When you didn't show up for cake, I was worried. Something had happened. Something did happen, Dad. I was uninvited from my own father's birthday. He sank onto the edge of my couch. I've been talking to your mother and sister for days, trying to understand why. Ashley keeps insisting it was a simple miscommunication, but he trailed off, shaking his head. But what? It doesn't add up. Your mother's story keeps changing. First it was a miscommunication, then she claimed she was trying to reduce your stress because of your promotion, then she suggested you'd mentioned being too busy for family events. The bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. Too busy for family events, Dad. I schedule my entire life around this family. I know, he said quietly. That's why none of this makes sense. My phone rang, interrupting us. I glanced at the screen, surprised to see my cousin Jessica's name. I'd always been close with Jessica, my Aunt Carol's daughter, who was just a year younger than me. I sent the call to voicemail, but it immediately rang again. You should get that, my father said. I've taken enough of your time. He stood to leave. Wait, I said, answering the phone. Jessica, can I call you back? I'm in the middle of something. Courtney, I need to talk to you, Jessica said urgently. It's about what happened at Uncle Dave's party. Can we meet somewhere private? Just you and me. I looked at my father, whose weary expression made my heart ache despite everything. Jessica wants to meet about what happened at the party. A flicker of hope crossed his face. Take the call. We can talk more tomorrow. After arranging to meet Jessica at a coffee shop halfway between our apartments, I walked my father to the door. He turned to me, his eyes swimming with tears. I love you, Courtney. You're my firstborn, my pride and joy. Whatever is happening here, we'll figure it out together. For the first time in days, I felt a tiny crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. The next morning, I spotted Jessica already waiting at a corner table in the back of the coffee shop. She looked nervous, repeatedly checking her phone and glancing toward the door. When she saw me, relief washed over her face. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down across from her. I've been debating whether to do this for years. Do what exactly? She took a deep breath. Tell you the truth about your mom and sister. What happened at Uncle Dave's birthday wasn't a one-time thing, Courtney. They've been excluding you from family events for years. The coffee I'd just sipped turned bitter in my mouth. What are you talking about? Jessica pulled out her phone and began scrolling through photos. Last summer's lake house weekend. Your mom told everyone you were invited, but chose to work instead. She showed me pictures of my entire extended family at my uncle's lake house, a trip I'd never even heard about, and the Christmas shopping tradition your mom started 3 years ago. She swiped to another photo showing my mother, sister, and female cousins at a holiday lunch. Ashley specifically asked your mom not to include you because, quote, Courtney always makes everything about her job and her accomplishments. Photo after photo appeared, family gatherings large and small that I'd known nothing about. With each swipe, the betrayal cut deeper. Why, I finally managed to ask. Why would they do this? Jessica set her phone down, her expression pained. I've tried to understand it myself. From what I've gathered over the years, it's a combination of things. Your sister has always been jealous of your relationship with Uncle Dave and Aunt Linda. She hesitated. Just say it, I urged. Your mom resents your success. While she was planning Ashley's wedding last year, she made some comments about how you were showing off with your promotion and how not everyone needs to be a career woman to be valuable to the family. I sat back stunned. So, all these years when I thought I was just missing gatherings because of scheduling conflicts, they were deliberately excluding you. Jessica confirmed. I've wanted to tell you for so long, but they swore everyone to secrecy. Ashley can be persuasive when she wants to be. She's been telling people you're unstable, that you can't handle family friction because you're too fragile with your high-stress job. Unstable me? I laughed incredulously. I'm the most stable person in that family. I know, Jessica said, reaching for my hand. That's why I couldn't keep quiet anymore. What they did at Uncle Dave's birthday crossed a line. Aunt Carol and I argued about it all the way home. She finally admitted she's been uncomfortable with how you're treated for years. Does my dad know about any of this? Jessica shook her head. Uncle Dave is kept in the dark about most of it. They're careful around him because they know how much he loves you. My mind raced, reevaluating years of family dynamics through this new painful lens. All the times I'd felt subtly excluded or belittled by my mother and sister. The way conversations would sometimes stop when I entered a room. How Ashley would share inside jokes with cousins that I wasn't part of. There's more, Jessica said hesitantly. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I think you need to know. Ashley's been having money problems since the wedding. Your mom convinced Uncle Dave to help them out financially, but he's apparently put his foot down recently about giving them more. And let me guess, they blame me for that too. Jessica nodded. Ashley told everyone at the lake house that you're always talking to Uncle Dave about financial responsibility and turning him against helping family. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything. The family I thought I knew. The relationships I'd treasured and nurtured for 32 years. Suddenly seemed like an elaborate facade. Behind it lurked jealousy, resentment, and deliberate cruelty I couldn't have imagined. I'm so sorry, Courtney, Jessica said, her eyes filled with tears. I should have told you sooner. No, I replied, squeezing her hand. Thank you for telling me now. At least I'm not crazy. At least now I know the truth. The week following my meeting with Jessica passed in a blur. I functioned on autopilot at work, my mind constantly replaying conversations and incidents from years past, reevaluating them with my new understanding. Small slights and odd occurrences now made perfect, painful sense. On Thursday, I finally took my friend Taylor's advice and scheduled an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Wilson was a serene woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a direct manner I appreciated immediately. Tell me why you're here, she said after I settled into the comfortable chair across from her. For the next 45 minutes, I poured out the entire story, the birthday party deception, Jessica's revelations, and the years of subtle manipulation I'd somehow missed. Dr. Wilson listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly letting me talk. What you're describing sounds like a pattern of family scapegoating, she said, when I finally ran out of words. It's unfortunately common in family systems, where there's underlying dysfunction. But why me? I asked the question that had been haunting me for days. What did I do to deserve this? From what you've shared, it seems you didn't do anything wrong. Often the family member who's scapegoated is actually the healthiest one. The person who might challenge the dysfunctional status quo even unconsciously. I left that first session with homework to start reconnecting with extended family members, to gather more information, and to begin establishing boundaries with my mother and sister. My grandmother was my first call. At 84, Margaret Stevens had always been a straight shooter, which made her presence at the birthday party all the more confusing. She answered on the second ring. I've been waiting for your call, she said, before I could even explain why I was calling. What your mother did was shameful. You knew she told me the party was canceled, I asked, surprised by her directness. Not until I saw your face when you walked in. Then everything became clear. She sighed heavily. Your mother told me you were too busy with your fancy new job to make time for family. I should have known better. Grandma, has this been going on for a while? Longer than you know, dear. Your mother and sister have always been two peas in a pod, and they've been controlling the family narrative for years. I've tried to speak up, but at my age they just pat my hand and act like I'm confused. Her confirmation both validated and devastated me. But why? What do they gain from isolating me? Control, dear. Your mother has always needed to be the center of the family universe. And Ashley learned at her knee. She paused. There's something else you should know. I overheard your sister talking to your mother about money. Jessica mentioned something about that. Dad has been helping them financially. More than helping. From what I gather, they've borrowed substantial sums from your father over the years for Ashley's wedding, for their vacation home renovation, for that ridiculous sports car your sister drives. Apparently, your father has finally put his foot down about giving them more. And they blame me for that, I said, the pieces clicking into place. You've always had a sensible approach to money like your father. I suspect they fear your influence. After speaking with my grandmother, I decided to take a day off work to clear my head. While organizing some old files in my home office, I came across a folder of family financial documents my father had asked me to keep for safekeeping years ago. Insurance policies, property deeds, and other important papers. Out of curiosity, I began flipping through them, and what I found made my blood run cold. There were loan agreements between my father and my sister and mother, loans totaling over $100,000 in the past 5 years alone. Each document specified repayment terms that, based on the dates, had long since passed without repayment. A note in my father's handwriting on the most recent agreement read, "Final advance. Cannot extend further funds without jeopardizing retirement security." I sat back in my chair, stunned by the implications. My fiscally responsible father had been bankrolling my mother and sister's extravagant lifestyle to the potential detriment of his retirement. And based on Jessica's and my grandmother's comments, they blamed me for his recent refusal to continue doing so. As I was processing this information, an email notification popped up on my phone. It was a message accidentally sent to the family group email that included me a booking confirmation for a luxury vacation rental in Hawaii for 2 weeks in August. The reservation was for my parents, my sister and her husband, and several cousins and their families. A vacation no one had mentioned to me. I scrolled through the message thread below it, my sister's words jumping out at me. "Don't worry about Courtney. She's way too busy with her job to take time off for family. Dad already asked her, and she said no." A complete lie. My father had never mentioned a family trip to Hawaii. My phone rang, startling me. It was my mother. After a week of silence, she was suddenly calling. I answered, curious about what approach she would take. "Courtney, this has gone on long enough," she began without preamble. "Your father is upset, and you're causing unnecessary drama in the family." "Unnecessary drama?" I repeated, incredulous. "You lied to me about Dad's party, and have been excluding me from family gatherings for years." A long pause followed. "I see Jessica has been talking to you." "Yes, she has. And Grandma. And I just saw the email about the Hawaii trip." I supposedly declined. Another pause. "You've always put your career before family, Courtney. We simply stopped expecting you to show up." "That's not true, and you know it. Isn't it? When Ashley was planning her wedding, where were you?" "Working." "When your cousin Lisa had her baby shower?" "Working." "You made your choices, and we adapted." I rearranged my entire schedule to be at Ashley's wedding planning meetings. I took personal days to help address invitations, and I was at Lisa's baby shower. I have the photos to prove it. My mother sighed dramatically. "This is exactly why we sometimes need family time without you, Courtney. Everything becomes an argument with you always needing to be right." I recognized the manipulation tactic for what it was: Darvo, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. Dr. Wilson had mentioned it in our session. "Why did you tell me Dad's party was canceled?" I asked, refusing to be derailed. The silence stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. "Your father has always favored you," she finally said, her voice cold. "From the day you were born, you were his special girl. Do you have any idea what that's been like for Ashley? For me?" The raw resentment in her voice took me aback. "So this is punishment for being close to Dad. This is about creating balance in the family. Ashley deserves time to shine without you swooping in with your latest accomplishment. By lying to me and excluding me from family events, how is that creating balance? You wouldn't understand. You've always had everything handed to you." I almost laughed at the absurdity of her statement. I had worked multiple jobs through college, while Ashley had her education fully funded. I had saved for years to buy my modest condo while they had helped Ashley with the down payment on her much larger home. "I think this conversation is over," I said quietly. "But before I go, did Dad really ask me about Hawaii?" "He was going to," she hedged. "That's what I thought." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "I love Dad, and I'm not going to let you damage our relationship with lies. I suggest you think very carefully about your next steps because I'm done being the family scapegoat." "Is that a threat?" she asked, her voice rising. "It's a boundary. One I should have established years ago. You'll regret making a big deal about this, she said before hanging up. I sat in stunned silence, her words echoing in my head. It wasn't just that they had excluded me from gatherings my own mother actively resented me for my relationship with my father and my career success. Just as I was trying to process this new reality, my phone rang again. It was my cousin Mark, his voice urgent and panicked. Courtney, you need to get to Memorial Hospital right away. Your dad collapsed after arguing with your mom about the party situation. They think it might be his heart. The hospital corridor seemed endless as I ran toward the cardiac unit, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. I found Mark in the waiting room, pacing nervously. Where is he? Is he okay? I demanded. They're running tests. Your mom and Ashley are with him now. What happened exactly? Mark ran a hand through his hair. I was at your parents' house dropping off some tools I borrowed. Your mom was on the phone with you, I guess. And your dad could hear everything from the kitchen. After she hung up, they started arguing. He was really upset, saying she'd been lying to him about you for years. Then he just grabbed his chest and went down. Cold dread washed over me. This is my fault. No, Mark said firmly. Whatever's been going on in your family, your dad having a health crisis, isn't on you. Before I could respond, a doctor emerged and approached us. Are you family of David Simmons? I'm his daughter, I said quickly. Your father has experienced a stress-induced cardiac event. It's not a heart attack, but his blood pressure spiked dangerously high. We're keeping him overnight for observation and starting him on medication. Relief made my knees weak. Can I see him? He's asking for you, but… The doctor hesitated. There seems to be some family tension. His wife was quite insistent that she and your sister stay with him. I need to see my father, I said, straightening my spine. Now. The doctor nodded, seemingly relieved by my firmness. Room 412. As I approached the room, I could hear my mother's voice, low and urgent. I paused outside the door, my hand on the handle. Dave, you need to calm down. Getting upset isn't helping your heart. How am I supposed to be calm? My father responded, his voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. You've been lying to me about Courtney for years. Our own daughter, Linda. Dad-Mom was just trying to protect you. Ashley's voice chimed in. Courtney gets so wrapped up in her career, she doesn't make time for family. Mom didn't want you to be constantly disappointed. That's not true, he insisted. Courtney has always been there when it matters. I chose that moment to enter the conversation, halting abruptly. My father was propped up in the hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily beside him. Despite the circumstances, his face brightened when he saw me. Court, he said, reaching out a hand. My mother and Ashley exchanged glances, neither looking pleased to see me. The doctor said you should rest, Dave, my mother said pointedly. I'll rest better after talking to Courtney. His tone left no room for argument. Alone, please. After a moment of tense silence, my mother nodded stiffly. Come on, Ashley. Let's get some coffee. As they left, Ashley brushed past me without making eye contact. Once the door closed, my father patted the edge of his bed. I'm so sorry about all this, Dad, I said, taking his hand. Don't you dare apologize. None of this is your fault. He squeezed my fingers weakly. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the party disaster. There have been so many little things over the years that didn't add up, times you supposedly couldn't make it to family events, comments you allegedly made that didn't sound like you. They've been systematically excluding me, Dad. For years. He closed his eyes briefly, pain crossing his features. I've been a fool, so focused on keeping peace that I couldn't see what was happening right in front of me. You couldn't have known. I should have. A father should protect his children, not enable their mistreatment. He looked at me directly. I confronted your mother after talking to your grandmother this morning. The things she admitted to Courtney. I don't even recognize the woman I married. What did she say? That she resented how close we've always been. That she was tired of hearing about your accomplishments when Ashley was struggling. That she felt she deserved more control over family gatherings after raising you both. He shook his head in disbelief, as if that justifies lying and manipulation. I absorbed his words, the final confirmation of what I'd begun to understand. What happens now, Dad? Before he could answer, there was a commotion in the hallway. The door burst open, and Ashley stormed in her face, flushed with anger. I knew it! You're turning him against us, she shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at me. Ashley, stop this right now, my father said, his monitor beeping faster. No, Dad. You need to see what she's doing. Ever since her big promotion, she's been trying to prove she's better than everyone. Now she's using your health crisis to manipulate you. The only manipulation happening in this family has been from you and Mom, I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. You've always been jealous of me, Ashley spat. Just because Dad loves me more now that I'm actually around for family, not running off to play big-shot career woman. That's enough, my father shouted, wincing immediately afterward and pressing a hand to his chest. A nurse rushed in, alarmed by the monitor alerts. Everyone needs to leave right now. This patient's blood pressure is dangerously elevated. This is your fault, Ashley hissed at me as the nurse physically positioned herself between us. Both of you out, the nurse ordered. In the hallway, my mother appeared, coffee cup in hand. What happened? Ask your daughter, I said coldly, nodding toward Ashley. She just caused Dad's blood pressure to spike by screaming accusations at me in his hospital room. My mother's face hardened. If you hadn't come here stirring up trouble, Linda, Ashley, a male voice interrupted. We turned to see my Uncle Frank, my mother's older brother, striding down the hall. What the hell is going on? I just got a call that Dave's in the hospital. Frank had always been the black sheep of my mother's family, straightforward to the point of bluntness, and the only one who consistently challenged her version of events. They'd had a strained relationship for as long as I could remember. This isn't a good time, Frank, my mother said dismissively. Dave needs rest, not more visitors. I didn't drive 3 hours to be turned away. Especially not when I hear my niece is being blamed for her father's health crisis. He turned to me, his expression softening. Courtney, you look like hell. Let's get some air. Before my mother could protest further, Frank steered me toward the elevator. We ended up in the hospital courtyard, sitting on a bench beneath a flowering dogwood tree. Your cousin Jessica called me, he explained without preamble. Filled me in on what happened at your dad's party and the aftermath. I'm not surprised, but I am sorry you're going through this. Not surprised. Frank sighed heavily. Your mother has been like this her entire life, Courtney. When we were kids, she'd manipulate situations to isolate anyone she saw as a threat to her position as the family favorite. She did it to me, and now she's doing it to you. But why? What does she gain? Control. Validation. The illusion of being the center of the universe. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn envelope. I brought these for your father, but I think you should see them first. Inside were a dozen yellowed letters exchanged between my father and his brother Thomas, an uncle I'd met only a handful of times in my life. The most recent was dated 15 years ago. Your father and Thomas were inseparable growing up, Frank explained as I skimmed the letters. Best friends as well as brothers. Then your mother came along. The letters told a heartbreaking story. My father and his brother writing back and forth, trying to understand why they'd grown apart, each believing the other was choosing to distance themselves. My mother told each of them the other was too busy, I asked, piecing it together. Frank nodded. Classic divide and conquer. She told Dave that Thomas resented his success and happy family. Told Thomas that Dave thought he was irresponsible and a bad influence on you kids. By the time they realized what was happening, the damage was done. Does Dad know about these letters? Not yet. Thomas sent them to me after their mother's funeral, when your mom managed to keep them apart even then. I've been holding on to them, waiting for the right time. He looked at me seriously. The pattern you're experiencing isn't new, Courtney. It's been your mother's playbook for decades. As we talked, my phone vibrated with a text from Mark Hospital security just escorted Ashley out. She was screaming about you trying to steal family money. What the hell? I showed Frank the message, then filled him in about the financial documents I'd found. That tracks, he said grimly. Your mother has always been materialistic, and Ashley takes after her. I've heard rumors about their spending for years. I need to protect my dad, I said, the certainty crystallizing in my mind, both emotionally and financially. Frank nodded approvingly. That's my girl. What's your plan? I'm not sure yet, but I know I need help. Would you be willing to meet with Jessica and me? I think it's time for a family intervention of sorts. I'm all in, Frank said without hesitation. Your father is the brother I chose, and you've always been my favorite niece. Whatever you need. As we headed back inside, I felt a strange calm settling over me. The shock and pain of betrayal were still there, but now they were accompanied by clarity and resolve. This wasn't just about a missed birthday party anymore. It was about decades of manipulation and the health and well-being of the father I loved. When we reached the cardiac unit, we found a security guard posted outside my father's room. The nurse supervisor approached us. Miss Simmons, your father has requested that only you and his brother-in-law Frank be allowed in for the rest of the evening. We've had to ask your mother and sister to leave, due to the disturbance they caused. Frank and I exchanged glances. How is he? I asked. Stable now. The doctor has given him a mild sedative to help him rest. She lowered her voice. He also mentioned concerns about potential stress from family dynamics affecting his recovery. As his medical power of attorney, you should be aware of this. I froze. I'm his medical power of attorney. She checked her tablet. Yes. According to our records, he updated his advance directives last year. Another piece of information my mother had likely been kept in the dark about, and another reason for her resentment. When we entered the room, my father was resting with his eyes closed. They fluttered open as we approached, and he managed a weak smile. My two favorite troublemakers, he said hoarsely. Frank chuckled. That's rich coming from you, Dave. Remember Miami '85? My father's laugh turned into a wince. Don't make me laugh. It hurts. I took his hand, suddenly overwhelmed with emotion. Dad, I'm so sorry about all this. Courtney Jean Simmons, he said, using my full name, like he did when I was a child in trouble. What did I say about apologizing for things that aren't your fault? Sorry, I said automatically, then caught myself. I mean, I'm not sorry. He smiled. Better. His expression grew serious. The doctor says I need to avoid stress during recovery. I've made a decision, and I want you both to help me with it. He took a deep breath. I'm going to stay at Courtney's place while I recover. Linda and Ashley will not be involved in my care. The firmness in his voice surprised me. My father had always been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over. Are you sure, Dad? That's a big step. He nodded. I've spent 35 years making excuses for your mother's behavior, looking the other way when she played favorites, telling myself it wasn't that bad, that all families have their issues. His eyes filled with tears. Watching Ashley attack you today was my breaking point. No more. Frank clasped his shoulder. About time, brother. I've got your back. I felt a surge of determination. We both do, Dad. And we're going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. The next morning, I met with Dr. Wilson for an emergency session, explaining everything that had transpired at the hospital. Your father's health crisis has created a turning point, she observed after listening carefully. How are you feeling about taking this stand? Terrified, I admitted. But also relieved. Like I've been carrying this invisible weight for years without even knowing it. And now I can finally set it down. She nodded. That's a common reaction when long-standing family dynamics are finally acknowledged. What's your next step? Dad's being discharged tomorrow. He'll stay with me during his recovery, which gives us time to figure out a long-term plan. I hesitated. But my mother and sister aren't going to accept this easily. They've already been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between guilt trips and outright threats. Which is why we need to talk about healthy boundaries, Dr. Wilson said. Your mother and sister have operated for years without them. Establishing clear boundaries now will be essential both for your well-being and your father's recovery. We spent the session mapping out specific boundaries, what behaviors I would and wouldn't tolerate, what consequences would follow boundary violations, and scripts for communicating these boundaries clearly. Remember, Dr. Wilson said as our time ended, boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about clarifying what you will and won't accept in your life. That afternoon, I met Jessica and Uncle Frank at a quiet restaurant near my condo. Jessica had brought along detailed notes about family events I'd been excluded from, while Frank contributed his extensive knowledge of my mother's long history of manipulation. We need a coordinated approach, I explained, spreading out a notebook. Dad's health depends on minimizing stress, but we also need to address the underlying issues so they can't continue. I've been talking to some of the cousins, Jessica said. Mark, Lisa, and Jordan are all on board with supporting you and Uncle Dave. They've seen Aunt Linda and Ashley's behavior for years, but were afraid to speak up. That's a good start. Frank nodded. The more family members who acknowledge the truth, the harder it will be for Linda and Ashley to maintain their version of events. I think we need a family meeting, I suggested. Not everyone at once, that would be chaotic. But key people who can help establish a united front. My house would be neutral territory, Frank offered. Linda won't like it being on my turf, but that's precisely why it's perfect. We spent hours developing a detailed plan, including who would be invited, what evidence we would present, and how to manage potential disruptions. By the time we finished, I felt more prepared but also exhausted by the emotional weight of it all. When I returned home, I found 3 messages from my father's doctor on my voicemail. Alarmed, I called back immediately. Miss Simmons, I wanted to alert you to something concerning Dr. Ramirez, said once we connected. Your sister visited the hospital this afternoon and attempted to speak with your father while he was sedated for a procedure. When the nurse intervened, she became agitated and mentioned something about papers he needs to sign before Courtney poisoned him against the family. My blood ran cold. What kind of papers? She didn't specify, but given the context and your father's recent cardiac event, I felt it warranted bringing to your attention. As his medical power of attorney, after thanking the doctor, I immediately called Jessica. You're not going to believe this. I began relating what Dr. Ramirez had told me. Actually, I do believe it, Jessica replied grimly. Mark overheard Ashley talking to your mom at the hospital cafeteria yesterday. Something about securing the future, while your dad is still grateful for our care. They're trying to get him to change his will. I realized the pieces clicking into place. Or sign over property, or give them access to accounts, something financial, for sure, Jessica agreed. I thought of the loan documents I'd found, my father's note about not extending further funds. They're desperate for money, and they think I'm the obstacle. After hanging up with Jessica, I paced my condo trying to decide my next move. A text from my mother only confirmed my suspicions. Your father needs to sign some routine financial documents. Stop blocking access to him. I didn't respond, instead calling my father's financial advisor, Michael Reynolds, who had been managing the family's investments for decades. After explaining the situation, I was relieved when he immediately understood the concern. I've been worried about unusual withdrawal requests from your mother for months, Michael admitted. Your father asked me to put some safeguards in place recently, requiring his in-person signature for anything over $5,000. Can you make sure nothing gets processed without direct confirmation from my father, not through my mother or anyone else? Absolutely. And Courtney, for what it's worth, your father has spoken proudly of you for years. He recently told me he was considering asking you to take over as his financial power of attorney as well. That night, unable to sleep, I began compiling a detailed timeline of family events, noting instances of exclusion, manipulation, and financial concerns. What started as simple notes quickly expanded into a comprehensive document with dates, participants, and supporting evidence where available. Around 3 a.m, I received a text from my Uncle Frank with an audio file attached. Just got this from Thomas, the message read. Thought you should hear it. I pressed play, and my mother's voice filled my bedroom. Thomas, Dave isn't up for visitors right now. His condition is very delicate, and he needs to focus on immediate family. I know you mean well, but traveling all this way would just stress him out. My Uncle Thomas replied, sounding uncertain. Linda, I spoke to Dave yesterday. He specifically asked me to come. He was heavily medicated when you called. He doesn't even remember that conversation. Trust me as his wife. I know what's best for him right now." The recording ended and another text from Frank appeared. "Thomas recorded this after your grandmother's warning that Linda might try to keep them apart again. He's driving in tomorrow. Thought you should be prepared." I added this new evidence to my growing file, a sense of grim determination settling over me. The manipulation that had shaped our family for decades was now fully exposed, and I wouldn't allow it to continue, especially not when my father's health and financial security were at stake. The next morning, as I prepared my guest room for my father's arrival, my phone rang. The hospital number flashed on the screen. "Courtney Simmons. This is Nurse Barrett, from Memorial Hospital. I'm calling because we have a situation with your father." My heart raced. "Is he okay?" "Medically, yes. But your mother and sister are here insisting he's being discharged to their care, not yours. They're attempting to change his discharge plan despite his clear instructions. Hospital security is involved, but I thought you should be aware." "I'll be right there," I said, already grabbing my keys. When I arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later, I found my father sitting fully dressed on his bed, his face flushed with anger. My mother stood near the window, arms crossed defiantly while Ashley paced the small room. Finally, my mother said when she saw me, "Tell your father he's being ridiculous. He needs to come home where I can take care of him properly." My father's voice was quiet but firm. "I've made my decision, Linda. I'm going to stay with Courtney while I recover." "This is her manipulation," Ashley interjected, pointing at me. "She's turning you against your own family." "Courtney is my family," my father replied. "So are you. But I can't recover in an environment of constant stress and conflict." The discharge nurse entered with a wheelchair and final paperwork. "Mr. Simmons, are you ready to go?" My mother made one last attempt. "Dave, there are financial matters that need your immediate attention. Just come home for a few days to take care of them. Then you can stay with Courtney if you still want to." My father and I exchanged knowing glances. "Any legitimate financial matters can wait until I'm stronger," he said. "Or Michael Reynolds can bring documents to Courtney's place if they're truly urgent." The mention of his financial advisor clearly rattled my mother. She stepped back, her expression hardening. "You'll regret this," she said, the threat implicit in her tone. As the nurse wheeled my father toward the elevator, Ashley called after us, "Don't bother coming back to the family, Courtney. You've made your choice." In the car ride to my condo, my father was unusually quiet. "Are you having second thoughts, Dad?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "No. I'm just coming to terms with how blind I've been. All these years I thought we were a normal family with normal disagreements. I never imagined." He trailed off, staring out the window. "We're going to figure this out together," I promised. "And you're not alone. Uncle Frank is helping. And Uncle Thomas is driving in today." "Thomas is coming." My father's face lit up, then clouded again. "Linda always said he was too busy whenever I suggested visiting him. That he had his own life, and didn't want to be bothered with family obligations." "That wasn't true, Dad. She was keeping you apart deliberately, just like she did with me." He nodded slowly, the reality of decades of manipulation finally sinking in. "How do we move forward from this court? How do we rebuild what's been broken?" "One step at a time," I said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "Starting with getting you healthy again." As we pulled into my building's parking garage, I added, "And by making sure nothing like this ever happens again." The next 3 weeks settled into an unexpected but comforting rhythm. My father recovered steadily in the peaceful environment of my condo, his color improving, and his spirits lifting as days passed without drama or conflict. I worked from home when possible, and Uncle Frank and Thomas took turns staying with him when I couldn't. The reunion between my father and his brother was both heartbreaking and healing to witness. Decades of manufactured distance melted away as they reconnected, piecing together the deliberate misunderstandings that had kept them apart. "She told me you thought I was a bad influence," Thomas said one evening as they shared beers on my balcony. "That you didn't want me around the girls because I was too irresponsible." My father shook his head in disbelief. She told me you resented my perfect family and found visits painful after your divorce. I idolized you and your family, Thomas replied quietly. Losing that connection was like losing a limb. Throughout this period, my mother and Ashley maintained a steady campaign of pressure, alternating between guilt trips, angry accusations, and occasional attempts at reconciliation that always seemed to include just signing a few papers. My father held firm, communicating only through brief text messages that he was recovering well, and would address family matters when he was stronger. Meanwhile, I continued building our case with help from Jessica Frank and a growing circle of family members who had witnessed the manipulation firsthand. What had started as a simple timeline expanded into a comprehensive documentation of patterns spanning years, photos of events I'd been excluded from text messages, showing deliberate misinformation, financial records revealing concerning patterns of spending and borrowing. By the 4th week of my father's recovery, Dr. Ramirez declared him stable enough to handle moderate stress. His blood pressure is responding well to medication, and his overall cardiovascular health is improving, she told me during a follow-up appointment. He's not out of the woods, but he's strong enough to address the underlying stressors rather than avoiding them completely. That evening, we finalized plans for the family meeting. Uncle Frank would host at his house with key family members arriving early for a pre-meeting strategy session. My father insisted on facing my mother and sister directly despite our concerns about his health. I've spent too many years avoiding conflict, he said firmly. It's time I stood up for myself and for Courtney. The day of the meeting arrived with a mix of dread and determination. Jessica, Mark, and several other cousins had already gathered at Frank's spacious farmhouse when we arrived. Uncle Thomas greeted us at the door, his expression serious. Linda and Ashley just pulled in, he warned. They brought reinforcements, Linda's sister Catherine and her husband. I wasn't surprised. Aunt Catherine had always been my mother's most loyal ally, backing her version of events without question. They're expecting to ambush us, Frank said with a grim smile. They don't know we've been preparing for weeks. We gathered in Frank's living room, the large space arranged with chairs in a rough circle. My father sat between Thomas and me, looking nervous but resolved. When my mother entered, she surveyed the room with narrowed eyes, clearly assessing the situation. Ashley followed, her usual confidence dimmed slightly by the unexpected number of people present. What is this? An intervention? Ashley asked, her attempt at a joke falling flat in the tense atmosphere. In a manner of speaking, yes, Frank replied, gesturing to the empty chairs. Please sit down. If this is some kind of family tribunal, I'm not interested, my mother announced, remaining standing. We came to discuss Dave's return home and practical matters not to be ganged up on. Mom, I said calmly, this is a chance for everyone to speak honestly. If you're confident in your position, you should have nothing to fear from an open conversation. She hesitated, then took a seat, motioning for Ashley to do the same. Fine. Let's get this over with. Frank began by explaining the format. Each person would have a chance to speak without interruption, focusing on facts rather than accusations. My father would speak first, followed by me, then my mother and Ashley, and finally other family members who wished to contribute. Before we start, I said, opening my laptop, I'd like to share some information that provides context for this discussion. I connected to the large TV mounted on Frank's wall, bringing up a carefully organized presentation. What is this? My mother demanded. Evidence, I replied, simply starting the slideshow. The first images showed a chronological timeline of family events I'd been excluded from, paired with texts and emails proving deliberate misinformation. Photos of vacations, holiday gatherings, and celebrations appeared one after another, along with messages showing how I'd been told these events were canceled or scheduled for different dates. Ashley shifted uncomfortably as her own messages appeared, including her direct instructions to cousins. Don't tell Courtney about Sunday's lunch. Mom wants it to be just us for once. My mother's face hardened as the evidence mounted. When I moved to the financial section showing the pattern of loans and the recent attempts to have my father sign documents while medicated, she finally erupted. This is ridiculous. You've taken a few misunderstandings and twisted them into some grand conspiracy theory. Dave, are you really going to sit there and let her attack your wife of 35 years? My father cleared his throat, his voice steady despite his obvious emotion. I'm not seeing attacks, Linda. I'm seeing facts. Patterns. I was too blind to notice before. This is ancient history, Ashley interjected. So what if we had a few family gatherings without Courtney? She was always wrapped up in her career anyway. That's not true, Jessica spoke up. I have dozens of texts from Courtney over the years trying to confirm family plans that you deliberately misled her about. One by one, family members added their perspectives. Mark described overhearing my mother instructing people not to mention certain events to me. My grandmother confirmed witnessing years of subtle undermining and exclusion. Uncle Thomas recounted how my mother had systematically kept him and my father apart through similar tactics. Throughout it all, my mother maintained a rigid posture of denial, occasionally interrupting with dismissals or counter-accusations. Ashley gradually grew quieter, her expression shifting from defiance to discomfort, as the weight of evidence became undeniable. Then I played the recording Frank had sent me. My mother actively preventing my father from reconnecting with his brother by lying about his wishes. When the recording ended, the room fell silent. My father looked at my mother, tears in his eyes. Why? Linda, why would you keep me from my own brother? For the first time, my mother seemed at a loss for words. She looked around the room, perhaps, realizing that her usual tactics of denial and deflection wouldn't work against such comprehensive evidence. You don't understand what it's like, she finally said, her voice breaking. Dave always had his perfect daughter, his precious Courtney, who could do no wrong. Thomas was always pulling him away for their brother adventures. Where did that leave me? Where did that leave Ashley? So you decided to isolate him from everyone he loved, I asked, trying to understand the twisted logic. I was protecting my place in his life. Our place. She gestured toward Ashley, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Mom, Ashley said quietly. I didn't know it went this far. The party was one thing, but all of this. Don't you dare back down now, my mother hissed. We've always been a team, Ashley. Us against them. Something in Ashley seemed to crumble at those words. I didn't sign up for a team, Mom. I just wanted Dad to be proud of me, the way he was proud of Courtney. He was always proud of you, my father said gently. You never had to compete with your sister. There was room in my heart for both of you. Ashley's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as years of pent-up emotion released. I'm sorry, she sobbed, looking at me. I was so jealous of you for so long. You seemed to have everything figured out, and I was always struggling to keep up. The raw honesty of her admission caught me off guard. For the first time in years, I saw my sister, instead of an adversary, a woman who had been manipulated as much as I had, albeit in a different way. Ashley, I said carefully. We were both played against each other. Can't you see that? My mother stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Dave, when you're ready to come home and be a real husband again, you know where to find me. As she turned to leave, my father rose to his feet, his voice stronger than I'd heard in weeks. Linda, if you walk out that door without acknowledging what you've done and committing to change, our marriage is over. The room went completely still. In 35 years of marriage, my father had never issued an ultimatum like this. My mother froze her hand on the doorknob. For a long moment, no one spoke or moved. Then, almost imperceptibly, her shoulders slumped. What do you want from me? She asked without turning around. The truth, my father replied simply. And then professional help. For yourself, for us, as a couple, for our family. She turned slowly, her carefully maintained facade finally cracking to reveal the insecurity beneath. And if I refuse, then I'll file for divorce, he said quietly. I love you, Linda, but I won't live in a web of lies anymore. I won't let you isolate me from my family. From any of my family. His gaze moved meaningfully between me and Ashley, making it clear that he wasn't choosing sides between his daughters. My mother looked around the room, perhaps truly seeing for the first time how many family members had witnessed her manipulation. Her sister, Catherine, who had remained silent throughout, finally spoke. Linda, I think you need to listen. I've supported you for years, but Seeing all this laid out, she gestured to the timeline still displayed on the screen. You need help, sis. This isn't normal. Something in my mother seemed to break at her sister's words. The defiance drained from her posture, and for a brief moment I caught a glimpse of vulnerability I'd never seen before. I don't know how to be any different, she whispered so quietly. I almost missed it. That's what therapy is for. My father said, his tone gentler now. But it has to start with acknowledging the truth. Ashley moved to stand beside our mother, but instead of backing her up as expected, she said, Mom, I can't do this anymore. The lying, the manipulation, it's poisoned everything. I want a real relationship with Dad, with Courtney, with our family. Don't you? For the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother at a complete loss. The careful control she'd maintained for decades was crumbling before our eyes. I'll think about therapy, she finally conceded, her voice barely audible. It wasn't full accountability, but it was a start. As the meeting concluded, family members approached my father and me with words of support, and in many cases apologies for not speaking up sooner. Uncle Frank, the orchestrator of this long-overdue confrontation, pulled me aside. Your father's a brave man, he said, nodding toward Dad, who was deep in conversation with Thomas. And you're every bit as brave. Family systems don't change overnight. But you've created the opportunity for genuine healing. I watched as Ashley approached our father, their conversation too quiet to overhear, but their body language suggesting a tentative reconciliation. My mother stood apart, looking lost and uncertain, without her usual role as family puppet master. What happens now? I asked Frank. Now, he said with a smile, we rebuild. Not the family you thought you had, but the family you actually have, with all its imperfections but without the lies. For the first time since discovering my family celebrating without me, I felt a spark of hope that something better might emerge from the painful truth. 3 months passed in what felt like both a moment and a lifetime. Autumn painted Frank's backyard in brilliant reds and golds as I helped set up tables for what we were calling our family reset gathering. The name had been my father's idea. Not quite a celebration, but a milestone marker in our journey toward healing. So much had changed since that confrontational meeting in July. My father had returned home after 6 weeks at my place, but only after establishing clear boundaries with my mother. Their relationship remained a work in progress, with twice-weekly couples therapy sessions and individual counseling for each of them. My mother's transformation wasn't miraculous or complete, but it was real. The therapist had diagnosed her with narcissistic tendencies fueled by profound insecurity, a combination that had driven her to control and manipulate those around her. On her good days, she showed genuine remorse for the pain she'd caused. On her difficult days, she struggled against the new boundaries, occasionally slipping into old patterns before catching herself. Ashley's journey surprised me the most. Once separated from our mother's influence, my sister revealed a capacity for self-reflection I hadn't known she possessed. Our first one-on-one conversation after the intervention had been awkward and halting, but over coffee the following week, something shifted. I always thought you had it all, she admitted, stirring her latte endlessly. Dad's approval, career, success, confidence. I never realized you were being pushed out of the family while I was being, I don't know, love-bombed, I suggested. She nodded. Exactly. Rewarded for playing along with Mom's version of reality. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I don't deserve it. But I'd like a chance to be the sister I should have been all along. That conversation marked the beginning of a careful rebuilding between us. Weekly sister lunches became a space for honest communication, for unpacking decades of misunderstandings and manufactured competition. It wasn't always smooth. We had genuine differences and real hurts to navigate, but it was authentic in a way our relationship had never been before. As I arranged centerpieces on the tables, Jessica joined me, carrying a stack of plates. Hard to believe it's only been 3 months, she commented, setting down her load. Remember where we were at the beginning of summer? I smiled ruefully, standing outside a window watching my family celebrate without me. Not something I'm likely to forget. And now you're hosting the fall family gathering. She bumped my shoulder playfully. Full circle moment. Not just me, I corrected. All of us together. The gathering today represented our new approach to family events: transparent planning, shared responsibilities, and clear communication. My father and Uncle Thomas had smoked brisket all night. Ashley had prepared her famous apple crumble. And even my mother had contributed her potato salad, working alongside grandmother. Without trying to control the entire kitchen, Frank emerged from his house carrying a tray of glasses. Reinforcements have arrived, he announced. Your dad says the meat will be ready in 20 minutes. Cars began arriving, filling the long driveway and spilling onto the adjacent field. Cousins with children in tow, aunts and uncles bearing side dishes, family, friends who'd been part of our lives for decades. Everyone had been briefed on our fresh start approach. No dredging up old conflicts, but also no pretending the past hadn't happened. My father appeared at my elbow as I greeted guests, looking healthier than he had in years. His cardiac follow-ups showed significant improvement, which his doctor attributed as much to reduced stress as to medication. Everything looks perfect, Court, he said, surveying the gathering. Thank you for making this happen. It wasn't just me, I reminded him. No, but you were the catalyst. You had the courage to stand up when it would have been easier to walk away. I spotted my mother across the yard arranging her contribution on the buffet table. She caught my eye, and after a moment's hesitation offered a small smile. It wasn't the warm maternal smile I'd longed for as a child, but it was genuine. Perhaps the first truly genuine expression I'd seen from her in years. How are things at home? I asked my father quietly. Better than I expected, harder than I hoped, he replied with characteristic honesty. Your mother is trying, Court. The therapy is helping her see patterns she wasn't even aware of. He paused. But 8 end of a 8 end a end a. She may never be the mother you deserved, but she's finally becoming the person she actually is, not the facade she maintained for so long. And you're okay with that? He considered the question carefully. I'm learning to be. 35 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight, for better or worse. But now we're building on truth, not illusion. He squeezed my hand. The boundaries you helped me establish made that possible. As the gathering progressed, I observed the subtle but significant shifts in our family dynamics. Conversations flowed more naturally without my mother orchestrating who spoke to whom. Ashley engaged with cousins she'd previously viewed as competition. My father and Thomas held court by the smoker, their brotherly bond visibly restored. After the meal, as people scattered into comfortable conversation groups, Ashley approached me with 2 glasses of wine. Peace offering, she said, extending one toward me. I accepted it with a nod. How are you holding up today? Better than expected. She glanced toward our mother, who was speaking with Aunt Catherine. It's strange seeing Mom like this, more subdued, less in control of everything. Strange good or strange bad? Both, Ashley sighed. I'm still untangling which parts of my personality are actually me and which parts were shaped by her manipulation. My therapist says that's normal, but it feels like standing on quicksand sometimes. I understand that feeling, I admitted. I've spent months questioning every family memory, wondering what was real and what was manufactured. Do you think we'll ever have a normal sister relationship? She asked, suddenly, vulnerability evident in her voice. I considered the question carefully. I don't know if normal is the right goal, but authentic, honest, I think we're already on that path. As afternoon stretched into evening, my father requested everyone's attention for a toast. Standing at the head of the long table, he looked around at the gathered faces with evident emotion. 6 months ago, I thought I knew what family meant, he began. I was wrong in many ways. I allowed patterns of deception and manipulation to damage the people I love most. His gaze moved between me, Ashley, and my mother. I failed to see what was happening right in front of me because it was easier not to see. He raised his glass. Today, I'm grateful for painful truths that led to genuine healing. For a daughter brave enough to stand her ground. He nodded to me. For a wife willing to face her demons. A gentle acknowledgement toward my mother. for a family willing to rebuild on a foundation of honesty. To truth and second chances, Thomas added, raising his glass alongside his brother's. To truth and second chances, the group echoed. As conversations resumed, I found myself standing slightly apart, taking in the scene. My mother approached hesitantly. "The centerpieces are lovely," she said, her standard opening when uncomfortable. "Thank you," I replied, waiting. She fidgeted with her napkin. "Your father says I should tell you directly when I'm proud of you, not just talk about it to others." The words seemed to require physical effort. "I am, proud. You stood up for yourself when I was wrong." Coming from a woman who had never admitted being wrong about anything, the statement was seismic. "That means a lot, Mom," I said quietly. "I'm not good at this," she continued, gesturing vaguely. "The honesty, the emotional openness. My therapist says I built walls so high, even I couldn't see over them anymore." "It takes practice," I offered. "For all of us." She nodded, seeming relieved at my response. Would you help me serve the desserts Ashley made, that apple thing everyone loves?" It was a small request, an olive branch of sorts. "Sure, Mom, I'd like that." As we walked toward the dessert table together, I felt the weight of the summer's events settle into perspective. The journey ahead wouldn't be perfect or easy. There would be setbacks, old patterns reasserting themselves, new boundaries to establish. But for the first time, we were facing one another as real people, not the roles we'd been assigned in a dysfunctional system. When it was time for family photos, Frank insisted on using the timer so everyone could be included. As we arranged ourselves on his porch steps, I found myself positioned between my father and Ashley, with my mother nearby, but not controlling the composition as she once would have. "Everyone say, 'fresh start,'" Frank called, as he rushed to join the group. The resulting photo captured something rare and precious, a family in the middle of transformation, imperfect but authentic, scarred but healing. Later, as guests began to depart, my father pulled me aside for a private moment. "I want you to know something," he said earnestly. "That day when you showed up at the party with soup, as painful as it was, it might have saved more than just our relationship. It saved me from continuing to live a half-truth of a life." His words crystallized something I'd been feeling throughout the day. Sometimes the most painful moments become catalysts for necessary change. The shock of seeing my family celebrating without me had shattered illusions I'd harbored for years. But from those broken pieces, something more authentic was emerging. As I helped with cleanup, watching my once fractured family working together in new configurations, I recognized the profound truth that had emerged from our ordeal. Sometimes the strongest families aren't those that never face adversity, but those who have been broken apart and deliberately, consciously rebuilt. The facade of perfection my mother had maintained for decades had finally crumbled, revealing the messy, complicated, but ultimately more satisfying reality underneath. We weren't a perfect family, we never had been, but now we were finally an honest one. And in that honesty lay the possibility of genuine connection I'd always longed for. Have you ever discovered that a relationship you thought was solid was actually built on illusions? What did you do when faced with painful family truths? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family healing is possible even after profound betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength and clarity in navigating your own family relationships.